And we're live with Jeff to talk about TI and Jeff's son.
TI or TI?
Introverted thinking.
Oh, okay.
TI, yep.
I don't like either one.
Ah.
Introverting or thinking. I don't like to do either.
So.
But I do actually do some of both.
Yes, you do, especially when you point out errors in my reasoning.
Well, that's just pointing out errors in your reasoning.
Mm. So, Jeff's son Morgan is his best fit type is ESTP, and the profiles will say that he's good at TI. Do you think that's fair to say?
And mine is ESFP.
Yep.
So we're alike but different.
Hmm. So how do you think you compare with TI?
What do you mean?
Okay. Can Morgan hear me?
Yes.
Right. Are there certain things that you think that you and your father differ on when it comes to introverted thinking?
Yeah, I think he's asking you.
Yeah.
He's doing push-ups.
Okay.
He may join in later, but he's not yet available.
Okay. What we'll do now is look at the model of the model G of ESFP for this function. And the idea is that this is the weakest function in the ESFP. It's the break function. It has other names. The John B model, which is a young theist model. They call it the trickster function. And SOCIONICS there's a few names for it. They call it the polar function, place of least resistance, and the vulnerable function. And theory has it, Jeff, that you don't. I'll just read through this bit here. This bit's a bit weird, this top one, but I'll read it anyway. The function is created, the one a person should create almost from scratch in order to survive. The usual name of the function is break, as its activation tends to slow people down and drain them. Oh, okay. Okay, I'll go on that second point. Do you find TI draining when people are going through logic and theories and things? Do you think they're overthinking things?
Yeah, I mean, theories, yes. Logic, I mean, it depends. I don't put as much importance on logic as some people do. But I'm not bothered by it in itself. It's just, I don't require it. Like, I don't, I don't put as much stock in it. But, like, it doesn't bother me as long as someone's not using that to try to stop me from doing something.
Right. Now you have a the audience might not know this, but if they're regulars, they should know this. Jeff has an INTP older brother, and did you feel that there was ever a conflict with him maybe being over theoretical or something like that, or maybe you could give like a concrete example where you think type was a role in the conflict?
Most of my issues with him were not being too theoretical; they were being too lacking in compassion or consideration.
Right.
And that, when he was younger, you know, in recent years, you know, he's not as much that way. Well, I mean, there's still a certain lacking in it, and it's not like his first instinct. He doesn't necessarily think about people's feelings that much, but I think he's more considerate just in his behavior because he's learned more, I guess, about how people react to certain things. So he, you know, he's gotten a little more polite and you're not quite as abrasive in certain situations. But you know, he'll still has his moments. I mean, he has strong opinions on things. It's just he doesn't always feel the need to express them. Whereas I know it's the thing with INTPs is that they tend to, and NTs in general tend to like to, or tend to feel like they have to correct things they think are inaccurate. And it used to be the way he did that was much more kind of in your face some of the time, and now he does that less. Although he will still correct things he thinks are inaccurate, he does it in a, you know, maybe a more respectful way. I don't know exactly how to explain that.
Yep.
I don't. We don't live in the same place anymore, so I don't see him on a daily basis or anything. But you know, on the occasions that I do spend time with him, yeah.
Just a bit of theory here on point number 3. So Dario's research, his brain research, showed that the 2 least preferred functions match. Actually, the match positions 3 and 7 in this. So for you, that for the ESFP, that would the 2 least preferred functions would be NE and TI. And for Morgan, it would be NE and FI. Do you think that sounds right, or is it a bit off?
Morgan said, which is why I hate my mother so much. His mother is...
Well, the ultimate... Yeah, and the ultimate conflictor for Morgan would be INFP. Is that true?
The type that he's dissed the most would be ENFJ.
Ah.
He feels in general towards ENFJs the way I feel about ENTJs.
Interesting.
So no, I think he said before that INFPs are scared of him, but that doesn't mean he has any kind of animosity towards them.
Oh yes, INFPs, and generally INFPs. Do you think they're the most likely not to like Donald Trump? INFPs.
I don't know. I think anybody who doesn't like somebody who's, kind of bullying, would be not like that. So, regardless of type,
right.
but I mean, when it comes to mine, I don't have a problem with NE per se.
Yeah.
Like, when you talk about least preferred, it's hard for me to gauge that. In myself, I would say that's not true either, because I think as far as in my intuition tends to come out the most when I'm like really tired, and then it's usually just kind of goofy random stuff, which I can enjoy sometimes, and I enjoy it in other people even when I'm not tired. I enjoy other people being that way because it can be funny, and I enjoy myself doing it when I am tired because I can come up with stuff that I wouldn't, in other times. So I don't really have a problem with that. And as far as the thinking, like, I wouldn't even say that it's not preferred. It's just, it's not natural. Like I said before, I've described that as being like in a treasure chest buried down deep in the ocean, because it's just not, it doesn't occur to me to approach things that way. But I have to say that having Morgan for a son has made me maybe a little bit more aware than I would have been, because it's like I'm confronted with his way of thinking on a regular basis, so I kind of have to deal with it.
Oh, can you give some examples, please?
You know, it's hard for me to just come up with like a example out of nowhere, but I don't know. It's just in general, like the way he approaches stuff. Like I'll listen to him just kind of talk about something, and I'll realize we think about it very differently. Like that's the thing, you know, from a function standpoint, is that Morgan and I take in information pretty much the same. I mean, we don't have the exact same interests in things or whatever, but in terms of our perceptions, like generally the information is going to be similar because we're taking it in the same way, we're noticing things in the same manner, but then what we do with it after that is different. And when he starts to talk about like the way he, you know, approaches problems or things in his life, it's very different than me, because I think, you know, to me, it comes off as kind of all over the place. And so I've described the difference in terms of like in our way of thinking, as mine is more of a linear, like a clothesline, and his is more like a tree with a bunch of different branches.
Yeah. Morgan, do you think
that I call myself a bottom line kind of guy. So to me, it's like I think of things as like the logical aspects of life, the facts of life are pretty straightforward. The feelings of life are not. Those are the things that are all over the place for me. And when people that are not feeling types, you know, describe feelers, then they tend to think, you know, kind of say similar things often. At least introverted feelers, I guess. You know, that it comes off as all over the place to them.
Part of the theory in socionics is that as people get better, as people get older, they get better at the role function. So as you said with your brother, INTP brother, that the way he's matured, you could say he's got somewhat better at, as you said, the people skills and the manners and things. And if we were to tag those with functions, we might say FI and FE. And you think that's fair? That certain INTPs can get better at FE and FI?
Yes.
No. No.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it depends, I guess, on what you do in life and how much interaction you have with other people. That has something to do with probably how much that applies. But
can I ask Morgan a question?
No.
Okay.
What?
How much do you think your dad uses NE?
When we're both really tired, we both sound really loony, and we both base things less and less on reality. And I would consider that, if you're going to tag a function to it, probably us using NE. So
19.6%.
Yeah, exactly. There's not an exact figure, but for the most part, in daily life, other than that, I don't think it's a normal occurrence, because the way I go about it is, it seems like a waste to me, because I can kind of, I've been around too much of my mother, so I can kind of understand, like, not necessarily how it works, but where it would go. I can kind of foresee where NE's going, even when I'm not understanding it myself. I don't know why she's going to the random thing she's going to, but I know what she's going to. That's why when I was talking about I was watching Family Guy, sorry about my father, I was watching Family Guy, and written by NE and dominated by the guy who just throws his NE at people and thinks he's comedy gold. And in the first season, which was actually good, there were multiple things in it where I saw the joke coming, even though, like, apparently my father said that it was like impossible to see it coming. He said that there's no way I saw it coming. I was making it up. but it's probably just because I've been around it too much. The Kool-Aid man thing, where everyone in the courtroom's going, "Oh no! Oh no! Oh no! Oh yeah!" and he goes through the wall. I totally saw that coming.
I don't think I said it was impossible. I said it was unlikely.
But I did.
It's pretty hard for me to believe, but I didn't say it was impossible.
And
Yeah.
my point with this, I'm eventually coming to, which is that I see that, but then I also see actual observations of reality, and I find more jokes and funny things that I can see there than randomly jumping into something else that you could think was funny, but there's so much more opportunity to find things funny in the actual reality of what's there. So like I just kind of think it's limiting to start going into intuition there because you have to make up the stuff your own when you can just see it and say it, which is more of a sensing thing.
Do you think NE and SE are sort of opposed to each other?
Well, I personally, I don't know about the general functions because singling out functions is kind of funky. I personally don't like the things that people who usually dominantly use NE do and say, but I've grown accustomed to disliking it. It's kind of a learned behavior because it's a combination of my mother being who she is and saying things with her mouth, and also ENTPs that I've met who constantly say these things, and then because they think that's so out there and that I didn't follow them, that in itself is funny and that they're better than me. And that kind of thing in and of itself has made me dislike those kinds of people and the things they do. And so there's some comedian that I pegged as an ENTP, and he, I was like attempting to dislike him because I'm not liking any or whatever because I was doing that. But he actually had a few things he got me. He was just too funny, and I can enjoy that after I get through the fact that I attempt to dislike people who do that because he had a few jokes that were so random and still funny because I could actually imagine what he was saying, which is kind of an intuitive thing. That I actually found it funny. So I can value NE, and I don't think that SE and NE are necessarily opposed to each other, because I think that they can clash very often because both are ways of getting information from the environment, but they do it in different ways. So they can. It's like the same thing where introverted thinking and extroverted thinking, clash more often, but they're not opposites because they're both thinking. So they're both extroverted. They both get it from the environment, and so they're not opposites, but they do clash often. I mean, I would figure it obvious that I think extroverted sensing and introverted intuition would be more opposed to each other because one is taking in information from the environment and the other is assuming information that isn't there.
Right, yeah. Dario has talked about in this book how those two functions can work together. So if, say, an ESTP has a vision, a plan, a future plan, and they can harness that together with the energy from the extroverted sensor, then that's those two functions working together. Or maybe
I can give you a more realistic day-to-day life example of them working together, which is that they both push you in different directions through fear to make you motivated to do things. Because extroverted sensing derives things from the actual environment that are frightening or need to be done or something. They actually take in the information. And the introvert intuition is like, sure, right now you think everything looks fine, but there could be snipers everywhere. Like it keeps you on edge. It keeps you in your extroverted sensing, keeps you noticing things because it says that introvert intuition is in the back of your mind saying that you don't notice everything around you. And so you try to keep up with extrovert sensing, thinking like, no, I will notice it. And so they kind of push each other to stay on edge. Meanwhile, this I I can't think of it as like they work together somehow, because they work against each other, which is how they work together. That's how it always works in my head. My head's always a war between two sides, which pushes me to do certain things.
But I mean, that's good though, because like, say you didn't have NI, do you think you'd be too much in the moment and not thinking of consequences?
I would be, yeah, I would have killed multiple people by now on accident.
Yeah.
Because I wouldn't have been as scared of the unknown. Because when I think about it, there's really nothing that's actually cracked down hard on me from hurting other people. In reality, I've back when I used to beat kids up because they looked at me funny, I would, and I say that like I was some gangster. I was in elementary school at the time. But uh, I didn't. There wasn't anything that was really that actually showed from extrovert sensing that was a problem. I figured I could get away with it because I could, because my charisma and everything else kept me in school, and they put me in ISS sometimes, but I didn't really think it was a problem because I could make do with stuff in there and I could still find fun things to do. So that wasn't really a problem. The problem was the fact that nothing had come down that hard on me. I could imagine that there was something out there that was worse, something out there that could be way worse, and that I would lose the reality that I had if I kept doing things like that. And that's introverted intuition, because it's kind of just out there. It's not really something that was in front of me. And that made me get a little more reclusive, and I didn't even have a whole lot of fun. I like holed up in my room and stopped going to school and stuff like that. So either extreme isn't good for me personally, but so it's not like so there's no pure of anything, because if you do a pure one thing or another, you're going to get disaster. And that's always, the more I've leaned to one end of the scale or another, the worse it's been. And I'm gotten more balanced as I grew up. And so I've been able to actually deal with more situations without flipping out or not understanding what to do or being scared or whatever, because I was a little more balanced. And so having one thing without another is not really something that's possible, and also not something that would be beneficial, because I've kind of experienced the closest you can get to that. What are you pointing at, dude?
That was a very good answer. Part of the theory is that because it's an inferior function, it's
Right.
it's strong, but it's not very well developed. Do you get that impression, Morgan, that it's like
the way you call it inferior function, that doesn't sound strong to me. It sounds inferior.
Well, yeah, I know. I mean, that's what
I
Jung called it.
No, some dude saying that it was the shadow function.
Yeah, did he actually call it inferior, or did he call it shadow?
Yeah, Jung called it inferior. In this little book by the Jungian analyst Anthony Stevens, he does call it the shadow function, and I think that's a good name for it.
The shadow function thing makes more sense to me, because it's the dark side. It's because it's not necessarily that's the bad thing necessarily, but it's especially in this case, extrovert sensing, introvert intuition. Extrovert sensing is noticing the things around you and reacting to them. Introvert intuition is the dark side of that. It's the thinking of the absence of things, the things that you don't see around you, and you think and you are contemplating things that aren't there. And that's that does have a strong part in my, I don't know, life and my thinking. But and I've had to combat it constantly, because if I focus too much on it, then I stop noticing the things around me, and that balance is gone, and I start just focusing on the absence of things, the things that are in my head that I've created that aren't actually there. And that's a problem, and it became a problem in my actual life. Um, and So yeah, I would be strong. I don't know what underdeveloped means because, well, I mean, I know what the word means, but I don't know what it means in this case because it doesn't seem like I can understand that you could develop uses for things later on, but I don't understand why a certain type would necessarily have not developed uses for something. It doesn't really make sense for me. To me? There we go.
Well, if they don't use it very much and don't value it very much. So, for instance, if you think of INTJ, do you think it's fair to say that they're thinking about several steps in advance? They're thinking about the consequences of things. That they plan a lot more than ESTPs. So it's that strategic versus tactical thing.
Again, that strategic versus tactical thing, it's like, now you're going to get me off on a tangent. The functions don't actually change if they're using strategy or tactics. The difference is the motivation for using them, and that's the functions too, not just the types. Because my thinking will bring me to realize the value and strong points of different things and know what they're good for and put them in the place that I think they belong. And that includes strategy versus tactics. So I can look at a situation, sensing, and use my thinking to realize that in this point in time, it is not tactics that I need to accomplish my goal, but it is a longer term strategy. And I can think of that and I can use that, but that's not really a type or a function thing. I've learned how to use things that I've encountered, even things that didn't come naturally to me. That's what the functions seem to me like just what my father was saying earlier. What more comes natural as your approach to something? Because introverted thinking, I basically use as a loophole to get around the fact that I naturally come to things in a different way than is sometimes best to approach a situation. Because I can encounter something, understand it, and then utilize it, even if it wasn't something that I thought of or I naturally came up with or I naturally approached the situation with. Because my natural approach is react to the situation and use thinking to understand what I have in a repertoire, what I can put out there that is the strong suit, what is more useful in the situation. And if I think of something that's like more of an INTJ thing that I saw in some movie somewhere that was a strategy, I can use that even though it wasn't something that was coming naturally to me. I still don't understand how underdeveloped works because it seems like I know it would seem like a different type would just use the function for a different reason again, as opposed to actually having a disadvantage in that function, an actual underdevelopment, an actual lacking of useful options in that function.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a misunderstanding of that stuff when I hear, like, I can remember a certain ESTJ that I won't name, but this person is prominent on some type groups and forums. And she said something, the quote was something like, I don't have SE. And I was like, if it's to the point that such a thing exists, then yes, you do have it. Like, because that's somebody who's sticking too much to a function model thing and looking at a thing and saying, oh, this says that, I use introverted sensing, therefore I don't use extroverted sensing, which is silly.
Yeah. it's also
but you have
laziness.
so many people
It's,
who say that kind of thing, and I'm like,
yeah,
if you really didn't use this, then you'd just be constantly falling over and running
I mean,
into everything.
yeah. I mean, I think I would say something like that. It's an intellectual laziness because it's too much of a shorthand.
Yeah, and there's a lot of that in the typology, in typology town, as the Podlayer people do. They're good for some things.
You used that phrase years ago, typology town. I saw that in one of your first videos.
Yeah, well, it came from this. It came from one of the Podlayer people that Demas or whatever his name is said typology town. So I always thought that was cool because it sounds like, you know, like a kid show, like they have that show Lazy Town.
All right.
It's like typology town. Anyway, in typology town.
Where'd that lazy Wednesday?
Yeah, right. Oh, that was the point. But there's a lot of people that instead of just like looking at it of how does this actually work in reality, they're like, oh, this model thing says I'm this, therefore that's what I am, and then they try to fit their behavior into that, which is backwards to me.
I like looking at reality, like you. I always like ask you questions like concrete examples because I like to test the models against reality. And
One of my, you know, my most repeated things when it comes to that is I'm like, you know, profiles about type do not they don't describe absolutes, they describe tendencies.
Yeah.
And your type is you behave a certain way, you have a certain preferences for life, and the type labels that rather than the other way around. You don't do
Yes. Yeah.
something because you are a type. So when somebody says, "Oh, well, I did this because I'm INTP," well, that's backwards. It's more like I do this, and because I did that, you know, in this way, it's labeled as being INTP, my collection of
Yes.
behaviors.
Yeah. Because that's what people do when they type someone, and they need to remember that when they type someone, they say, "Oh, this makes you INTP." So if they actually concentrate on how they actually type other people, they'll realize that it is the way round that you say it is.
Yeah, that's one of those things that a lot of people seem to not understand, though. Even people who like to think of themselves as experts or authorities in the subject.
Yeah, and they usually know one system, and they think they know it all. And
They go on and on about how superior that system is to everything else.
yeah, but they don't research.
Adapted multiple things together when my father was around in different hangouts, and I was MBTI was what I was first introduced to, and then SOCIONICS because of your crazy diagrams, and
My crazy guy rants. Okay.
and that fit together to, and I found the things in those theories that actually applied to my life, and so I found the things that fit, and I kept them, and so I had a mixture of different things that actually applied to reality, and I used that to understand people and have an actual utility, a purpose for such theories, as opposed to just having fun messing with models.
Brings it full circle, then, because that's, you know, an example of those, that I think that type of thinking, being able to incorporate different systems into your way of thinking or your way of operating, as
Yeah,
opposed
that's
to, sticking with the one track.
in fact that fits. In fact, Victor Galenko says that ESTP, ENFP, ESTP, ENFP, INTP, and ISFP have the same form of thinking that he calls holographic panoramic, where they put lots of things together from different perspectives to create their own multiple model. So Morgan, what do you like about socionics?
Me?
Yeah, you.
I believe at the time it was the interaction between types and their uh, functions, the interaction between the functions together. Because I could find because you were talking about models and theories, and then I could find actual examples when you were talking about them of that actual thing seemingly happening. I don't have any examples now because I don't remember your crap, but
My crap, yes. The
Yeah.
official crap. Was it stuff about like duality and
No,
and
stuff
conflict?
an ESTJ and an ISFP are talking to each other, and so because the ESTJ is thinking and the ISFP is thinking, some MERP happens. Like, I don't know, you were talking about stuff. Anyway, but that was like the kind of thing you're going with. You're like, this function messes with this function, and so they either get along or they clash or something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
And that kind of thing, I found actually applied because I could tell with my own encounters with other people. I could tell that I clashed most with people who actively, like ESTJs, who threw extroverted thinking at my face, and
Right.
and when I told them they were wrong, they would have a problem with that. And we would clash more often because they would stick to the one thing, and then I would attempt to find multiple ways to explain it to them that they were wrong, and they would take the fact that I was using multiple ways to explain it to them as evidence that I was wrong in my thinking. Because I wasn't sticking to the same thing over and over again, they didn't doubt the fact that I was wrong when really they were just not understanding something. I have my friend Colin. I've been friends with him for a ridiculously long amount of time, and I say friends loosely just because we constantly were fighting the entire time. Because he's an ESTJ, and whenever we talked, a lot of times our thinking would clash, and he would. There were multiple times where he just used a word, and he like mixed up two words. They didn't mean what he was saying. And I would be like, you keep using that word. I do not think it means what you think it means. And he would be like, no, it's totally what it is.
He's never seen Princess Bride.
You never seen Princess Bride, dude? Alright, shut off this hangout, go watch Princess Bride, and then come back to me.
Yeah.
And have a taco while you're doing it.
Yeah. Write down where you're up to, then go watch it, and then come back.
Chimichangas are good too. I prefer chimichangas now. Chimi's has like big fat ones though, and I like the outside better, so I like the smaller ones better, like at a Pueblo. Anyway.
Any, a little bit any. So would I have said something like you have a problem with STJs and NFPs?
I heard taco, and I was thinking tacos are good, and I was like, but I prefer chimichangas. That's a very simple sensing, thing. Tacos, chimichangas. It wasn't. Oh, that reminds me of this one time where I jumped off a cliff. That's freaking extroverted intuition. I jumped off with a guy named Paco, and actually that's still sensing because it's sound. Again, it's like any actual physical connection between things is sensing. When you go to the crazy stuff where it has like the overall theme is the same, that's kind of extrovert intuition.
That's true. I was being intellectually lazy because I wanted to get back to the point. So
The shorthand for intellectual laziness would be LI.
It's actually the code for my type. LI. Yeah. So what else?
Well, that's what's great about Socionics. They got like one of the types that's LIE. So their whole life is a lie.
Yeah, ENTJs. Yeah. So in fact, it would have been better to have that name for the ESTP though. LIE.
What?
Well, just for Trump.
What?
Nah. Forget I said that. So
I think you made a bad joke.
I did not hear the words that came out of your mouth.
I'm pretty sure you made about how Trump is a liar. I think that was his joke.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, everybody know that by now.
Yes. So maybe I said something more than like the Delta Quadra, the STJs and NFPs that you can have problems with.
Delta. Can I help you?
The STJs and NFPs, are those problem types for you?
I currently have an ISTJ friend, and I wouldn't know if we had problems because he wouldn't tell me. But for the most part, he acts like he's come to terms with the way I do things to an extent. So he seems to have found the good in me, whatever enjoyableness that he finds out of me, he has found, as opposed to just the surface of what he thinks I'm doing is stupid or whatever. Found the good in me. Because I think he was saying something like, I'm not going to say I was quoting him because I don't remember. Memory terrible is, he was saying that at first, when he was first hearing me talk, he was hearing me talk in like math class, and I was like teaching somebody math. I was like telling somebody this is how you do this, and so he thought I was like some like jerk who know-it-all guy who acted like he knew things but was actually just making it up, which is probably what I was actually doing at the time. So he was accurate. But then when I started being able to back up stuff I said, then he was like, okay, this guy actually knows what he's talking about. So he was like into that.
I, on the other hand, have never taught anyone math.
And so,
nor have I learned it.
Meanwhile, my constant agitator is my mother, just because she has her own ideal of what she wants our relationship to be, and that's not the way it is. And I can clearly state how things work between us, and she dislikes that because it's not all nice and happy-feely, because that's not actually the relationship we have. And when we do have fun times together, it's because she doesn't attempt to bring our relationship to an ideal. It's because she finds satisfaction in what we're already doing. And
just let the audience know, is your mother ENFP?
Yes. So the problem between us is constantly that she spouts introverted feels into my face and constantly throws them at me and doesn't allow me. And I'd say doesn't allow me. I'm saying she like jumps around to different things. Anything I say switches back to something she was saying about her feelings, and then whenever I simply say something she said was wrong, then she has her feelings hurt, and then I'm being mean, and then I need to be nicer to her because, I'm a big jerk.
Yeah.
When in reality, it's just that I do not enjoy when someone imposes upon me things that I dislike. And she is being the cooperative, is like trying to be like, we do this stuff together and we need to be happy and stuff like that. And
right.
I do not want that.
She wants you to cooperate.
I want to be happy and I want her to be happy, but those are separate things. I do not want our relationship to be a happy one. That's not something that appears in my mind. Something I think about is I'm playing Borderlands. That's fun. She's having fun listening to her podcast. That's great. But then when the problem is where like she likes taking over the airwaves, she likes, again, that podcast thing, when she has it in her earbuds, it's all cool. And when I'm listening to it and I don't have a problem, it doesn't clash with my game, that's cool. But when she like plays music that I dislike very loudly over my game to where I can't hear it, and then I have a problem. And then that problem, she turns it into our relationship again. So she keeps, like, I understand everything she's doing from her personality. I know why, and I try to explain what problem I actually have with it, and she can't, because she keeps getting stuck on her feelings get hurt, and then when her feelings get hurt, then she goes to extroverted thinking, and then she's like, okay, then this is the way, this is what's wrong, and then she has like her one track, like, this is what's wrong, we need to fix this, otherwise, screw you, basically. So I do clash with her plenty of the time, and by functions and stuff, and I know why, and it's because of that. Because all her functions, whenever she uses them, are terrible.
Yeah, I mean, like a real big clash on TI-FI, where in the model, FI is the weakest function and not valued at all by the ESTP, and for the ENFP.
It's not even that I don't value it, because I don't, that's true, but the problem isn't that I don't value it. The problem is that I'm uncomfortable when it is constantly when I'm constantly assaulted with it. When she's constantly telling me all her feelings, I am uncomfortable with that. And if she's like crying like right next to me and like whining about stuff I do, I am uncomfortable with that, and I wish for it to stop. And that is my main course of action there.
So
is it also when they start talking
overall-
about your feelings and making and judgments about you? Is that bad as well?
overall, he doesn't have as much of a problem of that with me because I'm not constantly throwing my feelings at him.
Right. And
I have
that's
my
the
moments,
thing. And that allows me to demonstrate the fact that I can, whatever you want to call it, the closest word that I've heard used here is respect his feelings on things. I don't need to tread upon them. But at this, because when he doesn't throw them at me, and it's not an evident, this is something that you're telling me about me, and I think is wrong. It's nothing like that. He's just saying how he feels about something. I can think that's fine. But at the same time, problems usually ensue when I allow that, but I at the same time am like, but also I think this other thing, or I think that you might be doing this other thing, and then that's me throwing my TI at him. So then he has a problem. And he gets his feelings hurt, and I'm attacking him. But
yeah, actually, honestly, the times, because there's times that I have the sort of dad things with him where I think, oh, well, I need to kind of nip in the bud that he's doing this to someone else, but it's not about my feelings. It's just about me trying to make sure he realizes things about people that are true. But that's when the times that I actually get the most like actual feelings hurt by him are the same type of things that my brother did. So it goes back to what you first asked me about. Well, actually, both my brothers, because
we're all the same thinking. We're all on topic here.
right.
Yeah.
Because the thing with all of them is, it's that thing where they're like jumping on something I said or whatever to try to like prove me wrong, and they're just like hammering stuff that I think is useless because it doesn't have to do with the actual point that's being discussed or the actual principle of the thing.
So it's like they're going.
It's like needless nitpicking.
Right, technicalities, that sort of thing.
Right, and it's like it's trying to be a gotcha. Like, oh well, you said this wrong, or you don't remember this one thing you said 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, my mother keeps saying that too. Like I'm constantly like trying to jump on things she says as a gotcha, but that's never my intention, and that's never even my action. Because when I think about what I actually do, I'm like, a lot of times something is presented to me, and if you think about it as like just a multiple choice, how do you respond here? It's like smile and nod, like actually think about if this applies to you or not, which is normally what I go with, or just like tell them to shut up. And that's like, so it's like when I actually try to think about something that is presented to me and figure out and introverted thinking has that way of finding the problems in things, and that's not a negative thing and detrimental that like a lot of people twist it as. It's that I find the things that I find the weaknesses and therein find the strengths of certain things and find where it applies to what. And then I can find where it goes in my thinking, my logic, my value of the world, my understanding of things. I can find where this thing is presented actually fits in to how I understand that. And when I'm not allowed to do that, when me saying such things and expressing where the problem lies and what the things are and where the strengths are, which then when that's called needless nitpicking, and that's, my normal way of understanding things is a problem, then I usually get agitated. And the way that I attempt to resolve the issue is a problem because I still use my thinking. So I continue to do this quote unquote needless nitpicking in order to fix the needless nitpicking. So it just expands. It escalates. It just becomes more of a problem.
Right. So what I can say for the audience is this is an example of how the break function works. When you can have a situation with Morgan and his mother where each one of them their weakest function is the other person's strongest function. So, as Morgan says, the TI rubs her the wrong way, and her FI rubs him the wrong way. And based on this, you can sort of predict so you can use the model and the model of the functions to predict what the relationship will be like. And this is what Socionics has to offer. That it can say, oh, maybe there'll be some communication difficulties because of these preferences.
Yeah, and that reflects reality in the sense that I think the times when we got along the most are when when I don't critically think about the things she does because I don't need to, because she's not giving me ultimatums, general feelings on life or ideals. She's instead just like saying things and saying how things remind her of other things that are funny and stuff like that. And I'm also finding funny things and such things to where we're just kind of more back and forth attempting to find more and more like amusement out of situation, and I find it out of the situation, which works because she finds it out of her theoretical stuff and things that she remembers, and she gets reminded of stuff, and then she says that, and then I hear that, and then can use that as basis for my amusement. So we can feed off each other and have a good time, but when we don't, it's usually because she needs to add feelings and emotion to everything. Not just she does, but what I do. She like thinks that I'm doing something and that she sees through my physical action to see the general theme that I have some feeling behind it, and when I don't, and when I try to tell her that I don't, then I'm being critical of me. So
is it when it's almost, is it like you almost feel that when people are questioning your motives and questioning your character, like, oh, you did this because of this, you did this because you're this type of person, does that really get at you?
I don't know if I have a general theme like that. I can see that theme in other SPs sometimes.
Yeah.
But to me, it's usually a lot more specific. I see because when I actually have a problem, I attempt to solve it. I don't just sit there and have a problem. So my thinking comes into play and goes, what's the problem? And then I find the specific point in which the situation changed to being problematic. I find the one action and I find where that fits in the situation and what its role was, what it actually changed in the situation. And I attempt to, with people I actually like, say, my family, people I don't I don't feel like I could just drop and not care about. I try to solve the problem by explaining that one specific point to the other person and attempting to find either a way around it or a way to fix what it was or a way from and first, before I even do that, I think of how can I fix this? It's not how can we fix this? It's not how they can make themselves better. It's how can I make this not problematic? And that's always a thing that seems to go unnoticed because, again, it's not something I say because it's something that I'm just doing. But my first instinct is always, how can I fix this? Not how can this be better? So it's not this general thing that I put on other people. It's something where I want to fix something. I want to do something myself. It's making myself better. It's making the situation better for my own power. And I'd rather do that. But it's usually when I cannot find a way to do that because it's so rested upon something that's out of my control that I attempt to just kind of be open about it and tell other people and just kind of explain what I was thinking about. And that usually gets me in a position where, because I'm kind of giving away stuff that was in my head, divulging personal, stuff that came out of my brain, people somehow have problems with that, and that kind of agitates me because they're like basically like, you're wrong. The stuff in your head is wrong, and the way you went about it is wrong. And that is a thing that will time and time again get under my skin, is when I actually divulge information to other people in the way I think, and then they criticize that.
not just what it was, like this is wrong and here's why, but the way I went about it, I could have done that better, kind of thing. So if you want the theme of what makes me agitated, there you go.
Right. So what I've written down here is, so it's like you actually have good intentions. You're trying to solve the problem and get to the truth, get to the heart of the matter to solve it. And as you're trying to get to the truth, get to like maybe the sore point for the other person, they might see that as insensitive and putting feelings aside, but your actual intentions are good because you're trying to solve the problem.
Well, regardless of intentions, that's pretty much exactly how it goes down.
And what I've always tried to get across to Morgan is not that, you know, from my perspective, I don't ever say his way of thinking is wrong. I say it's not as natural for me, but I don't in any way try to say that, you know, you're wrong to think this way. What I have tried to get across is here is what I have learned about how people will react to certain ways you express things. And that's what I've said is that when you express things in these ways, the tone is taken as rude or hostile or whatever, or ignoring people's feelings. That's not what you're trying to do. That's the way it comes off to other people. So there's two ways you can deal with that. One is you can say, well, I don't care whether it comes off that way to people. I'm just going to do whatever I want anyway. And the other is to say that I can consider that. Not I can change my entire way of thinking, because that's not even possible, even if it was recommended, which I wouldn't do. But it's more that you can think about, especially what you've already seen in your life has affected people a certain way, and think maybe there's a way that I can still do what I do, which is try to solve problems, but say things in a way that doesn't come across to people as if I'm dismissing their feelings or I'm attacking them in some way.
And that would
get across is that I already do that. I don't evidently do it enough.
Well, and
it's
not,
so
I'm not
obvious
suggesting that it's easy, and you're
that he doesn't feel the need to remind me to do something.
And what I have said is, you know, you're almost 17 years old, but you are way ahead of the average. I could say even limited to people of your type. You know, to say an EST, the average 16, 17-year-old ESTP has not considered nearly as many things as you have. And so by the time you're my age, or even even close to that, by the time you're 30,
I will have gone insane.
You will most likely not be seen as much that way by nearly as many people, because you will have developed that even further by then. You know, where again, it's not you changing your own self; it's you realizing how what you say and do affects other people, and continuing to grow in your consideration of that without denying your own self.
And that would be an example of dual use of FE and TI. So by developing your FE, Morgan, like for instance, what Dario has shown is that the NFPs and STJs, tone of voice is really big with them. And so you could say the exact same things, but if you just said it with a slightly different tone of voice, like go into slightly more FE mode, then you could have a different reaction, even though using the exact same reasoning.
And I understand that's the difference between what my father was trying to get across to me and what actual reality, how I do things, is that it's not a problem of me not considering things and me not noticing things. It's that I do notice them, and I can see the way FE works for me. The way that actually comes out is I see the situation, and I see a role that I can play into the situation. I can play into what the other person is doing. I can play into the room. I can play into the other people. I can play a role that befits them. And plenty of times I do this, and even unwillingly, I don't even think about it, and I kind of go into that, and I kind of do tone stuff down and stuff like that, to where other people are less taken aback by me.
Well, there's things that.
But other times I see it and I'm disgusted by it. I think it is something that I do not want to do and adamantly want to refuse. And that is when I am the most seemingly inconsiderate and short with people, when I realize that the way to play into them is something I absolutely do not want to do. and I'm just going to shove it in their face that I'm not going to be like that. I'm going to be the way I actually am, regardless of how they want me to react to what they're saying, and how they would feel better if I reacted a different way.
Right.
There's one example I can think of that, I don't know how recently, but at least for a while, Morgan would say, he would tell me, kill yourself.
Ooh.
And I can hear that, and like it doesn't bother me especially, but I'm still like, I mean, I don't like that, and I would never tell somebody that. And if he said that, to his mother, which he may have, I don't remember,
No.
she would have an even stronger reaction, to that probably. And that's the kind of thing that, when I think about considering other people's feelings, I come across something like that, because if he truly is considering that, then I would think that wouldn't be something that he would continue to say.
But that's not what that is. That's not where that comes from.
What do you mean?
Because that, in and of itself, the only reason I started saying that was because at the time there was two people I hanged it out with, and one of them said that at opportune moments where I found it hilarious, and then and so it became a thing that we said at certain times as a joke, and it was funny between us. And anytime I attempted to take that out of there, which would only be really with you, I guess, you found it not funny. So, and if you might have noticed, it's not a thing I constantly say nowadays.
Yeah, and that's why I qualified that by saying that it may
Because
may
the way
not,
that
haven't
and the way
heard
that
it
we
as
did
much
out
recently.
wasn't really considering feelings. It was just like the way that was introduced wasn't in considering feelings. The way it was introduced was the fact that I thought it was funny at the time. And the way it was weeded out was also because I realized that it wasn't funny in the situations I was using it here. I still, if I talk to that guy ever again, I still use it because it's still funny.
Well, then it seems like you're just proving my point, which I'm saying that that you don't always consider other people's feelings. It was like you were defending yourself as if you always did that or something. You're like, that's what I already do. And I'm saying you don't always do that.
No, I do always consider things, but that doesn't mean that my actions will take the most considerate option.
Yeah, because
you
find it. Is it the case that?
And I take things into account.
Right.
This is the thing that's different. People tell me I'm not considerate, and I say, I consider your feelings. It's not that I'm inconsiderate of your feelings. I consider them, and my value of them is less than your value of yours. It's just, that's how it works.
Okay. But understand.
And I already understand.
Understand if you do that people will perceive you, that you say you don't like that people perceive you as hostile when that's not your intention. But if you can, even if you say you consider people's feelings, but you dismiss it anyway because you don't value it as much, it is what you said.
That's literally not what I said. If you want to rewatch this,
you did not use the actual word dismiss, but that is what you are doing when you do that. You're dismissing people's feelings. So, if you choose to do that, then that is why you're going to be perceived as rude or hostile, because you choose to do that anyway.
It's because he finds things I do and says, and I attempt to phrase things a certain way to be accurate, and then he says, no, this is the reality of what you're doing. It doesn't matter how, specific you were attempting to be. This is the reality of what your actions are.
It doesn't matter whether you use the word dismiss. If you say, I considered the feelings, but I chose to do something anyway that did not reflect that, then that is dismissing someone's feelings. That's what that is.
It's a balance. He probably did it because he thought it was funny.
Like I don't know, like you're like uppity, like getting up giddy about how, like, that's what that is.
You know what that word means.
And you're like happy about how, yeah, I understand. See, that's what that is, Morgan. I'm explaining this to you. And meanwhile, I'm just trying to get across to you that doesn't really matter. Like, between you and me, You're telling me when we're together doing our own stuff, you tell me other people would find this something. And I'm like, why does this matter between us?
Okay, it matters because you complain to me about how other people treat you, or how other people perceive you, or things they do to you, or things they throw at you, or things they accuse you of. And because you tell me all those things, I try to be helpful. Just like you talk about solving problems, I try to solve the problem. And I say that here's something you can do that would, limit that problem, or fix that problem, or make it at least better.
And the problem with that is when I attempt to actually explain my own personal way I go about things, you attempt to override that with, again, but here's reality and this is how other people see things.
No, it's not. See, okay, from my perspective, it is not trying to override you in any way. It is trying to tell you, again, it goes back to, I'm not telling you how to think. I am not telling you your way of thinking is wrong. I'm not saying your way of feeling is wrong. I'm saying exactly what I said. The reality of it is, here is how other people perceive this. And I'm showing you examples where the things you have told me about the way people have reacted to you, I'm saying here is a reason why this could be why they react that way, and here's something you could do to make that happen less if it is a problem for you.
In the actual conversations between me and you, I find it less important what other people think, and more important that I am attempting to tell you what I do personally.
I agree with you.
And so it's aggravating when I attempt to get across something, and then you go back to points about how other people think about such things, when I'm just trying to tell you how I work. I'm just trying to give you more information, trying to be more accurate, before you start going on to points, but you don't allow that.
Well, I'm not sure what you mean by not allow. Like, I think most of the time I let you say a lot of things without interrupting you. And that, I think I agree with you that that's the most important thing. In terms of me being a father, I think if you're telling me stuff about your life, the most important thing I can do is listen. And so that's what I try to do. I do try to listen. And I don't automatically assume that you telling me about something that's a problem is you asking me for advice on it. There's some types of people who do tend to assume that, but I'm not one of those. But I do still try to see some moments as teaching moments, in the sense that I can say, I have experience with these same type of things. Often it's not from a perspective of me saying, oh, I'm somehow the one who knows everything, and I'm this superior person or something. I don't have that view. And many times it's that I went through the same thing of people responding to me in a similar way, and I had to learn ways that I could approach it if I didn't want that reaction. Again, it goes back to what's important to you. If you don't care that people perceive you that way, and it really doesn't matter to you, then it seems like you wouldn't mention it as much. Like you wouldn't talk about it as if it was a problem, if you didn't want it to change in some way.
The situation at the time that I would eventually, I guess, would be complaining about, in and of itself, would be the problem, and not the general theme of my actions. Therefore, telling me this is a way to get around such situations, this is a way to make people not accuse you of that, is not something that is as helpful, because what I was actually complaining about was more likely an actual situation in which I had messed up, not in which I didn't know what to do and I didn't understand at all. It was a situation in which I was attempting to get one thing across and I failed. So, in fact, my complaining about that and you initiating conversation, I would figure the conversation would lead back to instead me saying what I did. Again, me telling more personal things about me, not you telling me about other stuff. That's like almost when I'm thinking about things and telling other people about my thinking, that's never what I'm going for. Because again, it's always my thinking is introverted. It's all about the things I've acquired, accumulated, and put in place. And I attempt to tell people my map of the world that I've created. And when I do so, and they start telling me about how other things, then I'm like, then it seems unrelated. It seems like I need to explain myself better. And then when I realize that that doesn't even change the conversation at all, then I'm just like, why was this even happening? I could be doing something else.
Well, see, that's the thing is, this is not an area where I feel like I'm standing my ground on some sort of principle. So I'm trying to understand what it is I can do differently in terms of other than just listening, because that's what I try to do. Is there some way that you feel like I should acknowledge your way of thinking or your analysis of something before I say anything else? Or are you just saying that I should ask you more about yourself?
I wasn't trying to make a theme or
Okay.
a course of action protocol for anything.
All right, well, that's why I didn't
I was
understand. If you're
just
saying that
attempting
there's
to
something
explain
that I was doing that was
I've
frustrating you.
this conversation is past the point in which I actually was attempting to explain the one thing I was attempting to explain, because at the time you changed what I was saying to something else and then continued on that point. So I don't even remember what I was saying at the time.
I didn't change anything you said to anything because I don't have the power to do that. You said what you said.
Yeah, and then you said
It was about.
of itself,
I remember it.
and then continued logic from there.
If you're talking about when I said you dismiss feelings, even though you didn't specifically use the word
Yeah.
dismiss, then that's not changing what you said. It's just telling you my perspective on what you
At
said.
the time, I was going to elaborate on the way I actually incorporate things, because I do consider things. You take everything, every course of action, as a statement. Like, if I do this anyway, even though I considered someone's feelings, that means I dismissed their feelings. As opposed to what I actually do, which is more of a accumulation, conglomeration of things. I think of their feelings, I think of everyone's feelings, I think of my feelings, I think of the reality of the situation, I think of the practical uses, I think of the future events that could easily come out of this, I think of the patterns I've already seen of this situation, I think of the patterns I've already seen of these characters that are in this situation, and I do something.
So that's an example of what I was talking about earlier in terms of the difference in our thinking, because it sounds to me like what Morgan's problem with what I said is that I was like my using the word dismiss was like to him like an oversimplification. Like he's saying I consider all of these different things. So it's this big web of stuff. I called it a tree. And if I just look at one branch of the tree, I'm ignoring all the rest of the tree, and I shouldn't do that. But for me, it's like if the one branch of the tree is the only one that crosses the river, that's the one I care about if I'm trying to cross the river. So that's the one I'm going to focus on. And in this situation, if you can say, I considered their feelings, but then I chose to do the thing that hurt their feelings anyway, knowing that it would. That in itself is dismissing their feelings. It doesn't mean you didn't consider a bunch of other stuff. It just means that you decided in your mind that taking that action was more important than corresponding with, than considering the person's feelings. And when I say considering, I mean within the action. The action you chose, you determined that it was more important to do that than it was to act based on, what you knew about what the effect would be on the person's feelings.
But it doesn't mean they dismissed it, though. I mean, for instance, somebody can have a situation where they tell a mean joke, and they did that because in the moment that was funnier than the other person's feelings, and then they might apologize a little bit later on. Sorry, that was a bit mean, but it was funny.
Yeah, if you are aware of the effect on the person's feelings while you're doing it, then yes, you are dismissing that person's feelings at that time. It does not mean you're making a judgment that I don't care about that person's feelings ever. It's not making any kind of statement about the future or your general opinion of the person or anything beyond that. It's just saying within that moment, like you said, because I know what you're alluding to, that I did the same thing. When I have done that in my life, it is because I decided in that moment that doing that was my choice, despite knowing that it hurt someone's feelings. So I was in that moment dismissing the feelings of the other person, as it was not. What I mean by dismiss is it is not a large enough factor in the consideration of the moment to change my course of action based on it. That's what I mean by dismiss.
Right. Okay.
Okay. So what's the problem?
The problem is that the action still hurts somebody's feelings.
How is that a problem in and of itself?
Because it is.
Because Jeff, you probably weigh someone's feelings very highly.
The bad thing.
In fact, you probably weigh it. You probably put your own feelings first, being true to yourself first, then somebody else's feelings.
Well, I think almost everybody does. There'll be some people that would, you know, maybe a select group of people that were actually that they're that altruistic that they're all, you know. I think there are times where anybody could consider other people's feelings first. But the natural human thing is because you are within yourself, you have the most knowledge of your own feelings. Therefore, you're going to be most aware of that, and so it's going to be higher in consideration simply because you're more aware of it.
You state things
Yeah, I do.
that seem accurate.
It's the biggest compliment he's given me tonight.
I attempt as wherein he decides things and will change his decisions based off of moral factors, where he thinks or feels thinks of different things. Think and feel are in this point in time interchangeable. Thinks of different things in a moral sense, and how that impacts his decision, how that is affecting the situation. Meanwhile, I use a more practical thing that includes other people's feelings as well as simple, just a way to keep my options open so that I'm not attached and stuck in things that are uncomfortable or painful situations for me to be in. I use introverted thinking to allow me to be adaptable and change my decision making so that I am not going to be trapped.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that just because something is outweighed, Jeff, doesn't necessarily mean it's dismissed, but it does appear like that to the other person.
It is dismissed if it does not rise to enough of an importance that you change your course of action.
Fair enough. I can understand that.
If you discluded it altogether from...
But it's the same effect.
Yeah.
It's the same effect if you didn't consider it at all versus considered it and chose to do the same thing anyway. The practical effect is exactly the same.
What the difference here is, because I understand what you're saying there, and I understand that practically it seems like the same thing, and I understand that realistically it might as well be the same thing because it leads to the same effect. The difference then is, in the person's head, it's different. That's the actual practical difference between the two.
Okay, and I can accept that.
And I guess if someone had a way to read their mind, it's different for them too. Or if God, is thinking, is understanding their mind, then it's different there too. But even though I read a little bit of that stuff, he seems to like actions more than thoughts anyway. But but the difference there would be then not other people. It doesn't have a different effect on other people, but the action does have a different effect on the person itself that is taking the action. So someone who is doing something, having considered someone's feelings, and then is taken as hostile and inconsiderate, would feel more like they are being betrayed because they thought of their feelings, but yet because they decided to do something anyway, because maybe it was the better option from other factors, including their feelings, they felt like that was the best course of action, and in doing so, people acted like they completely dismissed feelings, and they thought that that was unreasonable. And that is the difference between that situation. Because if they really dismissed their feelings, then they wouldn't care that they were actually told that they were hostile and inconsiderate, because they would actually be hostile and inconsiderate.
Yeah, and that makes perfect sense to me. And that's why in any kind of long-term relationship, friendship, family, romantic relationships, whatever, the more communication, the better, because the only way you learn about those things that you can't read someone's mind about is to talk about them and learn over time that even if there's somebody in your life that does take actions that hurt your feelings and it seems like they're not considering your feelings, the more you get to know that person, you can learn they indeed are more than you thought they were. So you get to a better perspective where you're not as likely to, write off that person or have a hostile reaction because you don't think of that person as the same as dismissing your feelings entirely.
And I think being that open and constantly talking about considering things, especially for, I mean, I've gotten used to it, so I'm not saying it's hard for me now, but it would be harder to do than just keeping to what you're doing and not explaining yourself to other people. To just going ahead and doing everything you do without finding the need to go ahead and explain things to other people and attempt to get them to understand you, but go ahead and just, dismiss the fact that they don't understand you. I figured that would be more difficult to attempt to actually get them to understand you than to just ignore the fact that they don't. Because I've tried, it's more satisfying to just go, screw you. Like, you're telling me something that's wrong, and I'm not going to attempt to fix what you're saying. I'm not going to attempt to tell you more about myself and get to know you better, so you know me better. I'm just going to say, you know what, screw you. You're a jerk. Something like just right like that. It's easier to do that.
It's easier to do that, yeah.
And And I before, now I care much less about everything, but including that. I thought that I was underappreciated for actually attempting to get people to understand me as opposed to just saying screw you and ditching them. Because I basically went about doing that because I thought that was the better thing to do. And then when nobody acknowledged that that was better, I basically was like, well, this sucks. But I continued doing it anyway for some reason. And now I care much less about appreciation, because appreciation in and of itself from other people is not helpful.
It was a little bit like that quote from Avon about you shouldn't have to prove that you care.
Right. Yeah, I understand that to an extent. Yet I understand that. Yeah, I understood what he was saying at the time.
I understand that, yet I also think if you do understand people that are different than that, then you know that it's not as much about proving that you care, it's about fulfilling someone else's needs in that area. That someone feels better if you do certain things to demonstrate your caring.
Yeah.
If you truly care about someone, then you care about giving them what they need.
Right.
And so that is why
right.
When I think about, Morgan, because he's the most important person in my life, that a great deal of what I have done in my life has been with the consideration of what does he need. And as I've learned about him, I mean, the real him, like him as a person, not just as, a human that needed, basic human needs taken care of, like food, clothing, and shelter and stuff. As I learned about him as an individual, I could better help fulfill those other needs that aren't just the basic physical stuff. And so that is why, like I said earlier, I try, number one, to listen and make sure that he knows that I'm there to listen and to try to help him with things as best I can. That I'm not just trying to endure the time that I spend with him for as long as I have to legally. It's not a, there may be moments where I may have felt like that, but that in general, that's not the way I approach it. That I do care about him as a person, not just as an obligation, and that I'm very grateful that he has been as open as he has been with me, and that we've had the kind of relationship where we can share things, because I didn't have that with my father. So I mean, all this, Morgan and I've had so many great conversations, and the funny thing is, even the ones where we've argued and been somewhat agitated at each other, I still value those conversations a lot, because with my father it was very cut and dried. I was always scared of him, so I didn't want to talk to him most of the time anyway. And on the rare occasions that there was agitation between us, it was simply him putting the smack down, and there was no discussion about anything. And although obviously I know there are times in Morgan's life where he felt the same way about me, in terms of, that I wasn't listening to his perspective. I was just saying, well, this is just going to be how it is. there may be some truth to that. There's some times where that I felt that need to be the case, but I always cared about what his perspective was on things. And in a time when he wasn't directly, doing something that required some sort of response in terms of, a punishment type of thing, then I always wanted to discuss it with him as much as we could. All right. Thanks, Morgan, for your contributions to this video. He's going to take a shower now, so.
I thought that was excellent. To such an extent, I've considered retitling the video. But yes, very good.
Yeah, because it turned out to be less about me, which I as a general rule I don't like, but in this case I make an exception because I always think hearing Morgan's insight is always, if not always enjoyable to me, it's always at least useful, and sometimes it's very enjoyable depending on what he's saying. But.
Oh yeah. And the lesson I got that is that thing, ESTP is, they're probably not comfortable showing they care either.
Yeah,
because that goes against their self-image.
I would, no, for sure.
Yeah, because that would for an ESTP to show that they care, they would almost have to act like another type.
Right, and like what he said about like his mother throwing feelings at him.
Yeah,
yeah. I understand what he means by that because I've had people do that to me. But the thing is that in general, someone expressing feelings to me, I appreciate it a lot more. And in some cases, it's exactly what I need. But not always. And so I understand, like, he's not talking about a situation where somebody is sharing, this is how I feel, if you want to know about it. It's more like he feels as if it's being dumped on him, and he can't escape, like, the kind of heaviness of something like that. So I know what that feels like because I've been there plenty of times myself. But overall, I would still say I wish people would share their feelings with me more, because I honestly feel like people don't do it enough, and I feel like people have there's this societal pressure, especially on men, especially on males, that says you're not supposed to share your feelings. You're supposed to be tough. You're supposed to suck it up and do what you have to do. And there is some value to that, because you have to, ultimately, there are things that you have to do in your life, and you can't be debilitated by your feelings to where you just wallow in them and you never get anything done. But I don't think that it's healthy or a good thing to do to repress feelings constantly just because there's some kind of stigma attached to that. So that I have a problem with.
There's a line from Soul Tai in Battlestar Galactica, and his woman was having a problem. He was talking about, and he said, I think this was the line: "I shouldn't have to say that I love her. Isn't it enough that I feel it?"
Right, and the thing with feelers is that no, it's not enough.
Exactly.
Because what you're feeling inside you does not tell us that if you don't express it. Because what we need is something that shows that makes us feel it, not just that you're feeling it. So,
so a little bit of extroverted feeling.
Like, there are people within that are in my life that I know care about me, even though they don't express it very regularly. But even if it's only every once in a while, just those little things, is enough. But it has to be something. It can't be nothing. So when you say, isn't it enough that I feel it? No, that isn't enough. But it doesn't mean that you have to gush about it every day. That's not necessary. At least to me it isn't. There may be some people that they do require that, or they expect that. I've never been quite that way, but whenever anybody does, it's always good to me. In other words, there are some phrases I've never understood, like somebody saying that somebody gives them too much attention. I've never understood that concept. Or too much affection. To me, that doesn't exist. There's no such thing as too much affection. Now, there is such thing as someone being annoying in the way they express their affection. So that's a
Right.
different thing, though, than actually the amount of affection cannot possibly be too much in my mind. There is no such thing to me. I realize to other people that that's not the case, but for me, there is no limit to the amount of affection that I would accept from someone. But that being said, there can be ways people express affection that can be annoying or
Right.
off-putting
Right.
in some way.
Like, say if someone's very clingy, say, and a partner that wants to they want to spend all the time with you, and it's almost as if you can't do anything on your own, that they're always there, and it's like too much of a good thing.
And see, I can understand there are people who are bothered by that. I'm not one of them. Like, if I enjoy a person's company, then I would be fine with doing anything with them. There is nothing that I would say, oh well, I don't want this person with me while I do this. There's nothing I can think of that would be the case about, because like I said, I don't, even the way you said that, you were like, I can't do something on my own. I don't want to do anything on my own. I've spent most of my life doing things on my own, and I don't like that.
No. It's just that you frequently hear men say things like, oh, she's too, I want to have time to myself.
Yeah, I'm not that way. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. I'm not clinging. If I like someone, I'm fine with them clinging.
Right.
That's great. I have very rarely experienced that in my life. So I treasure the times that I have had that.
And also sometimes they might use the word, maybe it's a different kind of thing. Oh, she or he is very possessive.
Yeah, well, when you start getting into that,
and controlling.
When you start getting into something where the person is trying to change you in some way, trying to dictate your actions, like this is the way you should be, or this is the things that you should look, or these are the things you should say. When it starts to become a controlling thing, that's different. I don't think clinging is the same thing as controlling.
Right. But because if say a woman wants a man to spend time with her all the while, she might then get into a situation where it goes towards the darkish side, where it's like, you're spending time with my friends, and you're not going to be seeing your old friends anymore. You're going to be seeing my friends and doing more stuff with me.
And when you do that, when you try to dictate that sort of thing, then you're crossing a different line. That's a different thing than spending as much time as you can with the person that you want to spend time with. For instance, you have relationships where, obviously, like you said, they have friends already, and then someone starts a romantic relationship, and then say you had a tradition of, you went out with the guys every Friday night to watch a game or something.
Yeah.
And now, the girlfriend or whatever is like, well, why don't we do something on Friday nights, as opposed to you going to this other thing.
Yeah.
Me, that's a case of where you have to find compromise, and say either she can go with me to meet the guys, or we can alternate, every other Friday we do something, then we do that with them, whatever. There has to be some sort of like thing you can compromise where it's not you're just completely shutting out one or the other.
Yep, definitely. And also something else, when Morgan was talking about, when we were talking about maybe using more FE or using more consideration of the other person, then he was saying, but if he did that, it would stop him from being him. And that was like almost like FE versus the artisan temperament.
Yeah, and see, that's where, I think he will learn, I hope he will learn, that really isn't the case, that you don't have to you don't have to cease being yourself in order to respect other people's feelings and not hurt other people's feelings. That stopping to think, wait a minute, is what I'm going to do really important enough to risk hurting someone's feelings, or that I know it will, or can I maybe do something differently, or say it a little differently, or it doesn't have to be like a complete change of personality. It can just be a slight change in the course of action, as opposed to just saying, well, this is just who I am, deal with it. Or
Yeah.
screw you, like you said. It doesn't. There's a compromise there. There's a way you can consider other people, and I do it all the time at work. I mean, that's every single day. I don't think he realizes how many times at work I have to hold my tongue and not say what I really instinctually would say, because if I did, it's not just in the moment someone would perceive me a certain way. It would last, because most of the people I work with are guardians. They hold grudges. Yeah. They keep things. If you have one day where you yell at somebody, they're never going to forget that.
I'm a bit like that too.
Yeah, that's in there. And every day from then on, their perception of you is colored by that. And
yeah, I'm like that as well.
So I have to consider that, even though there are plenty of times where, I could say, oh, I'm just being me. But the full me on 10, they can't handle that, and really they shouldn't have to, because it's not, I'm not the boss, and the company does not revolve around me. It's not about allowing me to do everything I want to do all the time. It'd be great if it was, but that's not what it is. And I have to accept the reality of that and make the decision it's not even a matter of, like, you could call it maturity, but it's not even about maturity necessarily. It's just accepting reality. It's just, it's me saying, well, do I want to be stubborn and hold to this thing where the most important thing always is I'm going to be me and forget what anybody else thinks of that, because if they can't handle it, that's their problem. Like, I could operate that way, and there are plenty of people who do. But when people operate that way, then their life is more, I don't know what the right word is. It's more in upheaval. I mean, I've held down the same job for almost 11 years now, and people who have that attitude are not likely to do that, because they're going to offend enough people that they're not going to be able to stay in a job that long.
Right, and I've got a good example of somebody like that. If you see EJ R&D's videos, like, he proves that, and he's over 10 years older than Morgan. He'd be about 28 by now, and he sticks too much to being himself, and he alienates so many people, and he talks about it, and then he ends up just calling them losers.
Yeah, and so I've seen that at different stages, and that's the cool thing about when you know type and you see people of the same type at different ages and different situations in life, and you can see a contrast between the people that have learned to accept that and the people that haven't. And sometimes within the same family. Like, I have a coworker where he's got a brother that's probably the same type as him, but you see the difference in that. Although there are plenty of times that he has said or done things that people have reacted badly to because of him being him, he is still the responsible one when it comes to the two of them. And so you see the contrast between him and his brother that really does do the, I'm going to be me no matter what, screw everybody else, all the way. And my coworker has, what he would say is a higher quality of life. He likes to use that phrase. He says, it's about quality of life. And he looks at his brother's life and very easily thinks, that is what I could be if I hadn't made certain choices that I've made to avoid having that outcome.
Yeah.
So.
Another simple way of putting it outside of typology is just developing manners. The social graces, I suppose.
Yeah, and when I was a kid, you know, I mostly saw that stuff as, well, there's no reason to do this. It's just what old people want you to do for no reason. And what I had to learn was that there are arbitrary things, but you can differentiate those between the things that actually are about considering people's feelings. Like, what side of the plate that the fork is on doesn't have any real effect on anything.
I could give you an example. There's a window cleaner I know. He has all this high technology for cleaning windows. He does it on a pole. But the thing I got to talk to him about, and I think this guy's an SJ, is he was talking about what Russians would do on a holiday in Egypt. And like I said, talking about manners and things, their convention is that instead of going up to like the counter and reserving a table, they would just go over and put a packet of cigarettes on the table or their coat on a chair. And he would talk about all of these things that he considered rude, was probably just like, as you said, arbitrary things.
Right. There are things that are just like, they're customs that are kept just because they're customs. Like, this is just what we've always done, so this is the way you do it. That's more of the Guardian way of looking at manners. Whereas the way I look at manners is, it's a matter of respecting the other people and how they perceive things, including the Guardians. You know, it's everybody. And so you could put my daily life, and you could put me in front of a jury of certain people, and they would find me guilty of not being the right etiquette and manners and all that. They would say, well, you know, you don't hang the toilet paper the right way, and you don't do this the right way, and all these things that are arbitrary. But what the compromise I make is that I get with the things in manners that are about actually respecting other people, like thanking people for things, for instance. Like when I was a kid, I used to resist when, you know, my parents or grandparents would you know, insist on me saying thank you for stuff. But what I learned is, it's not about just parroting a phrase. It's about demonstrating to that person that you're actually, you know, grateful for it. And so and if you are, then people are more likely to be that way for you, you know. And so it's a mutual exchange rather than a conformity. It may come across on the surface level of being conformity, but to some people that's all it is, but to other people it's not. And what I'm talking about is considering that the effect of how you respond to other people and want people to treat you, you know, the old golden rule. That to me is more important than the arbitrary stuff, like, you know, what side of the table something is on, or, you know, how you fold the napkin or stuff like that.
But what is?
Right.
I also thought that saying thank you and stuff, please and thank you, were just annoying conformities, and that I should resist them to be a rebel. But then and they were, for the most part, when people were telling me to do them, that's what they were going for. But but I did use it. I learned its use when I actually wanted to get across that I was actually thankful for someone doing something, which is why I also become aggravated, not like super agitated or anything, but I think it's useless when people thank me for something that I don't understand why they would be thankful for, because, say, my father was constantly telling me to take out the trash, just as an example. And then I actually did it at some point because he was constantly telling me to, and then said if I didn't, he'd do something else. Then he thanks me afterwards. Why would you, I don't understand, and I don't even need to understand, I just find it annoying that I would be thanked for something that I was, attempted to be forced into doing. Meanwhile, I do find the phrase useful for when I actually find someone did something of their own accord that was beneficial to me, and seemingly for the sole purpose of being beneficial to me. I usually thank those people.
All right. But that's good. When you actually feel it, that's good. That's the right way of doing it. When you are actually thankful, thank people. Yeah, and being true to yourself.
in that, you know, there are people that when somebody sneezes, they feel like they have an obligation to say something in response to that, like gesundheit or bless you or something like that. I generally don't do that because the act of sneezing itself, to me, whatever phrase anyone says, is just sort of a conformist thing someone's trained to say. They don't really have any feeling behind what they're saying.
That's also the reason why my uncle Kenneth, Derek, ever watch this video, he might actually understand this. He was aggravated, or that's not it. He used me doing this as an opportunity to further his own propaganda.
Ooh, tell him.
That's not exactly what's going on. But anyway, in World of Warcraft, it's a customary thing to say, like, congratulations or congrats or grats as the shortest possible form, and with a Z if you want to be extra annoying. When someone levels up or gets an achievement or something in your guild. Meanwhile, I actually did it when I actually was like I used that phrase in that situation, but I only did it when I was like, hey, that's cool, man, you actually leveled up. Sweet. And I'm like, and my next thing isn't like, I'm not doing it for customary reasons. I'm like, oh man, congrats. And then I'm like, you know, what new skills are you getting or something like that? Like, I actually want it, like, it's because I think it's cool they leveled up. It's not a customary thing that I'm continuing. Meanwhile, he, when he was playing with me and Scott, which Scott has no problem with customary things being continued because he finds it slightly amusing or something. Kenneth, on the other hand, took that as an opportunity to be like, that's just a useless thing, there's no meaning behind it, they're just spouting that everyone else does. And when in reality, that wasn't what I was intending to do. Because again, I actively dislike that kind of thing, just like he does, but he doesn't like being like other people and recognizing his similarities with me. But yeah, I don't like customary things in and of themselves either, but I do like using things. I can use those same things and don't have I used to have a problem with using them at all, and now I can use them for my own purposes, even if the customary one annoys me.
Morgan, does it help you that you've got two people that are also TPs, like two uncles that are TP types?
Kenneth wasn't really super influential for the most part because he wasn't really in my life a lot, where the pretty much direct opposite was Scott, because for a while I was pretty much talking to him every single day. And I'm not saying that Kenneth had no interaction with me or influence on me, but my uncle definitely had some influence on me, and he I think he probably is the one that let me find amusement in customary things other than the fact that they're customary, because he still he engages in things that he sees, like LOL. I never typed that ever before he did it, and we would do it together. Kenneth also thought that was stupid that we did that. But I found my own amusement in that and found my own usefulness for it, regardless of it being a continuation of other people's crap. So I think it really probably was him that made me find value in things that otherwise I would consider useless.
Right.
Kenneth had a different effect on me, as opposed to a more inclusive one like Scott. It was a more challenging one, because he would do things and say things to reflect, that would reflect, not to reflect, that would reflect my own agitation at my own actions of their stupidity and such. He would point that out as well and have his own problems with me being stupid and doing things that he found in other people was agitating or stupid or compulsory crap that he didn't like continuing being spouted. So he made me even more critical of those kinds of things. So the complete opposite of Scott. So, but that in turn, because two different people brought me two different ways, allowed me to be able to better change the way I talk to individual people, as opposed to having one philosophy for life. I am able to adapt better because at first it was more like my philosophy for life was customary stuff is crap. And Scott made me more inclusive of those kind of things, find their usefulness and use them. And Kenneth made me, like, showed me again that still in certain situations it can be pointed out and also found amusing that of their stupidity. So, you know, you can go back and forth instead of having to have one little philosophy.
Do you think you're, Scott, for the audience, I think is your INTP
Right.
uncle. Do you think he helped to, just through having conversations with him, do you think he developed your TI?
I don't know. If you talk to him, which you won't, probably.
That's true.
He's a hermit in a cave. His two things are working so he has money and then playing video games that are fun, or watching anime sometimes. Or delaying work until the last minute by doing boring things like reading 4chan and then eventually working and then playing video games. But he might be able to. He told me at one point that he had something where he was like dealing with me as a kid at a certain age, and then at a certain point he basically was like, okay, he's not a kid anymore. Like he found some point in which I had apparently had some breakthrough to where I was on a higher level than whatever I was before. So he apparently has some kind of understanding of me changing under the time that he was talking to me. But I do think he might have helped my. He more likely, because we were usually talking together in video game settings, he definitely increased my understanding of video game strategy as opposed to video game tactics. Because I would always attempt to find the tactical advantage. I would always try to find combinations of stuff that would beat other people, as opposed to him, who would be like, this is the way to, like, this is the best way to be able to, this is the most efficient way to be able to, like, get to the max level in World of Warcraft. I would be like, if I use this ability first, then I can counteract most paladins, because they always try to use their stun first, and then I can, counteract this with Indomitable. So I would think of, like, tactical solutions to things, and he would think of strategic stuff, and I always thought that we were a great combination together because of that. So I could bring the tactical value, and he could bring the strategy. So I thought we were pretty cool together, and I thought that we would probably be able to own people in PvP, but he never wanted to get into that.
Do you think that maybe you've been able to apply some of those things that you've learned in a game setting, where in the game setting he taught you to be more strategic, and maybe you carried that over a little bit into real life?
A little bit? Video games are real life.
If you know what I mean, like in real life.
I've learned many real life lessons through video games, and that includes things that I've learned through interaction between other people in video games, including my uncle. I apply many things that he taught me in World of Warcraft and StarCraft and other games that we play together that also have craft in the name. Into real life.
Examples?
Huh?
I'd like to hear some examples.
Fish, chicken, turkey, beef, pork, chicken scallopini.
So yeah, Morgan, what did you learn in the games that you could apply to real life?
I think it's just the way I think about things, the way I recognize situations for the most part, because that kind of includes the way my TI works. Wrapping this back into the objective of the video, I incorporate. Hey, dude, can you give me a cup and some water for me? Cool. I would incorporate things that situations I've been in before in video games, including that of things where, like certain quests in World of Warcraft. Right this second. Oh, shoot. Tasty. Themes of things for the most part. Patterns that I've recognized from video games. I think he didn't really give me like life lessons for the most part, because I don't really get those from people. I usually get just like utility solutions to situational problems. So I'm thinking about how to go about something one way, and then I remember a similar situation in which Scott had a different approach because he thought of it less short term and thought more about progressive growth and stuff like that. Like I would think my talents in World of Warcraft, I would spec my character to be as amusing and different as possible. But then he kind of showed like the most efficient way to actually be better. So if I actually wanted to be, so I had the ability to switch off, I could actually be better. Like I can incorporate some of his ideas and be a stronger character because of it, strategically putting my points in the places I needed to, as well as still attempting to pick talents and stuff that were more amusing. Like, if anybody listening understands, the original Death Knights in World of Warcraft when they first came out, first of all, they were overpowered as all hell. And secondly, they had a way to, you could build them to be completely anti-magic, to where you could destroy any mage, because you could, you had multiple ways to silence them and make them not be able to cast any spells of the same school, as well as reflect magic damage, steal spells, and be completely immune to magic if you stacked the right abilities. And I found those out because I was looking for like loopholes in the system to be able to find like the most like ridiculous stuff I could do. And I also found that doing so, I was very weak when I was fighting with Scott, because if I wasn't fighting a mage, then I would not have the necessary talents to be as strong to stay on level with other people who were of the same type. Now I'm just talking about video games. This is the most off topic I've been in a while.
No, it's good because the tactics, it transfers over.
Yeah, I don't have specific examples of stuff like that. Because it's hard for me to come up with them. Because when I'm in a situation, I recognize the situation and recognize tactics that I've, come across and attempt to utilize them. That's how that works for me. So I can't just be like, these are strategies that I've realized and incorporated into my life, because I don't remember that.
Right. What are the other ways that you think in a similar way to Scott?
I don't know. When I was talking to him, I thought he was just really cool because, as opposed to my father, when I said things, he could actually understand them. And that was like, groundbreaking for me. I was like, this guy just like understands me. Like he can, and if he doesn't, he can figure it out. You know? And he actually was helped by my continuing and specifying information using TI, giving more information, doing the parallel logic and thinking to give examples, and using trying to get more specific on points, and he could follow my web thinking as opposed to my father here.
Yeah, the things that
could not
Uncle Scott would not understand about Morgan were the more artisan things, like
right,
lying for no reason and stuff like that.
Yeah, he did understand why I would lie for no reason, which, I mean, I don't either. I just do it. It's amusing to me sometimes, and sometimes it's a vague attempt to stall for time. And he would immediately recognize and be agitated by such things and attempt to point that out to me. He also was agitated by my insatiable urge to kill every chicken in World of Warcraft, even though it did not give me any experience and was therefore wasting time. But all such critters like squirrels and chickens were very amusing to murder along the path to doing quests. That was the compromise. Yeah, I used to like go on a wild spree of finding every little squirrel and chicken I could just blow up with the giant fireball and watch because it was hilarious overkill. And then I kind of compromised by along the way to doing a quest, I would murder the ones on the way as opposed to finding all of them. So it was a little mixture. I learned how to, consolidate time and be able to do two things at once. There's another life lesson he taught me. Kill chickens on the way. Don't have to waste time just killing chickens.
Because as Taylor taught us all, ugly chickens deserve to die.
So true.
You mentioned before about shadow NI, and this is what the book says for SEWs.
Even times like that.
It's got, their inferior function is intuition, which, being introverted, is triggered by inner events and not related to outer happenings. When activated, it tends to give rise to negative hunches, which are generally off-beam. As a result, people of this type may suddenly become paranoid or hostile for little apparent reason. Their crude, undifferentiated intuition can also carry them off, much to everyone else's surprise, into some esoteric cult, such as anthroposophy, or some form of archaic mysticism. So, a little bit mental, like EJR&D.
I understand what you're saying to an extent. There were some terms that didn't make sense, but that's probably my intuition is the reason why I think magic is so cool. Mixed with sensing. Again, I don't think they're shut. I don't think that they're singled out. It's always together. It's always they work together. Because again, when you leave one side or the other, you get more of the negative aspects that was told there. And when you get the actual true type and actual personality when you mix the stuff together, as opposed to talking about them individually. When you talk about it individually, you get intuition makes them paranoid. That's true. I get paranoid for no reason when I focus on intuition, because I can just look at this window in front of me that has blinds covering it, and I can think about anything being behind that. And I can think about how I have no idea what's behind that. And there can be a whole lot of things that can come into my mind stemming from that. And that can make me paranoid.
Squirrels.
Yeah, it's probably an army of squirrels. Anyway, they're back for revenge. After killing all their friends in World of Warcraft. But again, that paranoia mixed with actual sensing and reaction to the environment keeps me on edge. It keeps me like ready to not just like tunnel vision focused on the situation, but also ready to react to things that I can't see, things that might not be there but could be there. So it sounds paranoid, but it's in reality it's just kind of, you always got to be on borderline between paranoid and down to earth in order to actually be on the keen edge, ready for anything. But yeah, that reading made me understand the intuition part, because there are multiple times where if I'm too in my head and I'm not interacting with the environment very well, then I will just kind of go on a tangent. I'll like kind of see something that in my head clicks with something else, and then go from there, and then think that there's some conspiracy going on and that I have no idea. And a lot of times I go to that when I'm bored with my environment, when whatever it is so boring that I have to resort to the results of my imagination and intuition making things up.
Right, so this is how Dario, these are some of the things Dario...
That's another reason how intuition is useful, because I lie all the time for no reason, right? So in doing so, intuition can be the most useful for making things up, because it can be the most detailed and specific about events that have never occurred, about things that aren't there. You can be really detailed about stuff that you've never seen when you put sensing and intuition together. I can completely make up stories about me doing all kinds of things that I've never done ever, but I can give every detail. I can tell you what color the trash can was, what direction stuff was facing, or the sun was at the time. But I'm making it all up, and it's a nice combination use of function for both.
Yeah, when I used to tell Morgan bedtime stories, I would do that because I would look around the room, and then I would tell the story based on like stuff in the room. But then I would incorporate it into the story. And then I would always have like sort of one kind of comedy twist happen in the story that would be sort of like the climax, and then I would have the end. But I always had to like make it just long enough that even though he would ask me to keep telling or tell him another story, I could say no, we'll do another one tomorrow night. So if I just if it was too short, then it was like it was a letdown. So I had to tell enough of the story and tell it from scratch based on like stuff I was seeing, but I would make it into a story. So yeah, that's how that happened.
Darinari.
Darinari. Yeah, and so this is how he defines NI, and he's got like a little questionnaire to judge the strength of it. And so on level 1, we've got experience a sudden aha realization about a problem coming as if out of nowhere. Does that happen?
Of course.
Yeah.
Again, this is reminding me of psychology class I'm taking, and what I continuously learn is that stages or levels of things are usually terrible and bogus and crap, in case those don't all mean the same thing for you people. They seem to make things too inflexible and unrealistic.
Well, when I did the online test, I thought a lot of the questions were like 2NF. And then so I scored really low on the NI, but I scored higher in the book description. And then the next one is feel attracted to the symbolic, archetypal, or mysterious.
Yeah, see, there you go. Like when you go with how strong something is, and then you go with if you prefer or are attracted to such things, then you're already alienating the people who don't naturally are not naturally inclined to such things. Because level 2, you already lost me. Because I'm like, I don't really care.
Right.
Because I'm curious about things that have something where I see an actual amusement out of it, as opposed to there could be something amusing there. I don't know. That's so intriguing. I don't ever have those thoughts.
When I look at this, I say, well, these are sort of the things. Well, this one sounds more INFJ. This one sounds more INTJ. These
out there.
And then we've got here's one. Experience a premonition or foresee the unexpected.
Yeah, I do that. So yeah, skip 2.
Yeah. And then we've got the middle developments. We've got gain a profound realization from a mystical state or catharsis.
It sounds a little creepy.
Yeah, it sounds a bit NFJ. And then the next one is push your mind to envision a solution to a problem that hasn't come up yet.
I've multiple times when I'm bored created complete scenarios of things that could possibly happen and then engage my response to them, if that counts.
Yeah, that would count, yeah. Then we've got synthesize a new idea that transcends various opposing points of view.
That's so vague that it could apply to many things I've done. But that doesn't really... it's too vague to really mean anything. Yeah. But there you go. If you're in strong enough, then you take more specific applications out of vagueness.
Right. And then we've got, and then this one's a bit more NFJ. Achieve a metamorphosis, definitive insight, or powerful vision of change.
Yeah, the part where you assume stuff based off of things you made up. Yeah, I tend to stay away from that.
Right. Yeah, achieve. Where did I say assume?
I said assume because that's what that is.
Oh, right, okay.
To achieve something that you made up.
Yeah.
You're just making something up. And then when you apply that to reality, you're assuming something.
Yeah, that seems NFJ to me. And then we've got this one here. Transform yourself in a specific way by focusing inward on a way you foresee you will need to be in future.
That is something I attempt to do and don't get very far. I
Right.
think of things like that sometimes.
Right. So the pattern with NI is its focuses on the future and change.
Right.
So that's it. And so Socionics will call it, or Galenko will call it, intuition of time, and he'll call any intuition of possibilities or opportunities.
That makes some kind of sense, maybe. I guess the difference is when you mix the functions together, you get a completely new thing that can be a kind of a cross, because extrovert sensing would seem like something that looks for opportunities. But at the same time, when you mix in some introvert intuition, you can look for opportunities for things that have yet to have happened.
Yeah, and it depends on the models. Like the role function, this is like a shadow function. So for SE DOMs, it would be NE. Now, in Victor's profile of, like, say, ESFP, anything that has to do with creativity, he'll put it in like the NE box.
Right.
But it's like it's observing the same things that Kersey observed, but he's just categorizing them differently. So
that's a
like,
customary thing for Ns to think that they're the creative ones and all that.
Yeah, I know. And then so I'll show you here. This is the model G for ESFP. And so yeah, everything that's like the artisan nature gets put in that functional bucket.
Right. Yeah, it's like NE does a bunch of spontaneous stuff and is resourceful. Yeah, the resourcefulness thing specifically, because my mother supposedly, as an ENFP, would have NE dominance, but she is envious of my resourcefulness because she attempts to think outside the box but doesn't use the resources around her. She attempts to find some that aren't there, and that's the problem she continues to have. And that's not something that just understanding that is so easily fixable, and it's not necessarily something that needs to be fixed either, which is something I keep trying to tell her, that there are certain strengths that can be actually used for, as opposed to having to do everything the best way, because the best way for your situation is useful, but only in that situation. And she keeps trying to change herself in this metamorphosis style of intuitiveness, where she needs to be this completely changed person that's better at everything, and as opposed to being resourceful and actually using her strengths in the situation to benefit her. So I think that that's not really an NE thing, because evidently she's not good at it. And she doesn't think that way.
I suppose what Victor does, he has like two versions of each function. So he's got like NE plus there and then TE minus.
Yeah, what's the plus minus? Was the minus like the... I don't understand. I don't understand what the plus minus thing's about.
Well, he's got like 16 functions. It's like he looked at, say, the types that have the same top functions.
8, but then you have plus and minus. What's the difference between plus and minus?
Well, it's just like two different. Part of it is
actually positive and negative, like the negative aspects or something, or the positive aspects.
I've got a sheet on it. I have a graphic for that. So explaining the charges is around here. It is. It's one of these at the bottom. It might be this one. That's it. So this explains why he came up with the charges. And then he compared, like, say he compared ESFP and ESTP, and he looked at the different ways they used SE. And he thought maybe, well, SE in the ESFP is more about resistance, and SE in the ESTP might be a little bit more about power.
You could say that. For me, it's always, you could say, because again, it's motivation and kind of what you do, where you go to get there. And I wasn't stuttering; I was changing words. There's a lot of WH, what, where, what's to do.
Yep.
But what was I thinking? Right. The way I attempt to go for power or even use power is different than other types. That's the thing. That's the difference. Because everybody wants or uses power in some way, or uses something else to get their same goal. It's always just a difference of what tools you're using and why you're using them. So I keep my options. I attempt to gain more options, practical options and applications in different ways to be able to do the same thing or to be able to get different results. That's what I attempt to constantly find more of and get more of and create more of, more opportunities, more options to, because that way you can maneuver out of things that are traps or attempts to, or even just, life dragging you one way to make you unable to do something. You gain power by being more elusive and adaptable.
Right. Yep. And also a bit of TI in there as well.
Right.
Like that.
Mixed together.
Yep, that's the thing. Some of these are more useful than others. So, for instance, he saw a difference in how TI is between ISTP and INTP, and I wondered if how well these fitted Kenneth at the top and Scott at the bottom. I'll just let the audience know.
I use that more bottom one, and that top one sounds like most descriptions of TE. Because it even has linear in there, rationalizing one and only right decision, following your principles. And to that extent, I've seen, but again, this is a personal difference, not a theoretical difference, between multiple ISTPs, where I see that they have some kind of principles that they adhere to and get aggravated when people, step on them or tread on them in any kind of, or slight their, things that they've accumulated. But that's the difference, I think. That the TE would probably do that based off of something else. Because the TI would have the decision and would be aggravated when someone tramples on their logic that's straightforward and is the one right decision, but the way they've gained it is through multiple sources of information and webbed together. So it's still TI. I can understand how. So the difference here is how it comes out, not how it's gained, not what it actually uses or how it processes information, but how it uses the process of information. This kind of seems like it's really
an Ingelenko's model. An Ingelenko's model of
I'm awesome.
Yeah. An Ingelenko's model of
supposed to be about. So.
Yes, but we adapted.
No, that's not acceptable. Get this crap off of YouTube.
So you've got TI minus, that fits Morgan more, and that fits the model. We've got TAT plus and TE minus for the differences between.
Sorry, bud, can't read it because
TNT
he
Dynamite.
Because he doesn't want me to be involved anymore. I'm stealing his thunder.
Okay.
That's not. He's reading a bunch of stuff into that. I just moved it over.
Actually, I'm just making some.
Okay, fair enough.
Do my thing.
So now we go back to.
Yeah, my thing.
No, I don't think it's your thing.
I don't have that thing over anymore because you bought your own PlayStation. But before the first PlayStation was me convincing your mother to give you a PlayStation.
What's that have to do with anything?
I just talking about stuff.
Okay.
I just remembered that at some point. That I had convinced, and my birthday present to you was convincing your mother to give you a more expensive birthday present, which is something that allowed you to get something you wanted.
Yeah.
That's a very ESTP thing, that.
Yeah, I used what I had. I didn't, at the time, because it's difficult for me to think of things to give someone, because I'm just so straightforward about it. So I'm like, and it's weird when it's like allotted time periods, like birthdays. Like, I am just like, someone wants something, and if I have the opportunity to give it to them, then I'm like, oh, hey, here you go. Sweet. I have that opportunity to gain affection points with someone. There I go. And that was how it worked out at that point in time. But it doesn't always. See, I'm that one guy who doesn't give people presents on Christmas because I'm a jerk. But then one time I'll manage to convince a gift out of someone else that's actually really expensive and is the exact thing they wanted, which is he wanted MLB The Show, and I got his mother to buy him a PlayStation as well as MLB The Show as a birthday because she's a cooperative, so she's like, oh, it's a present from the both of us. So there we go. Worked out.
All right. Insight into the ESTP's mind.
That was really in my head.
That's some like what you got on the screen there.
Yep.
Like most of that is like really like to the point.
Oh, so it fits.
Yeah, like maybe I mean it's been a while since we looked at this colorly thing, but more so than a lot of them, I would say. So somehow he's got the exact that aspect of people of my type pretty well, I think.
Yeah, you get that with Victor's profiles. Like, it's either like super duper bang on, or it can be like, whoa, that's some kind of outlier. Because
yeah, like I don't really completely understand what number 1 means, which is kind of funny, I guess, because it says has difficulty, has difficulty knowing what this is talking about because he has difficulty with it. I wouldn't say I'm evasive when it comes to explaining the motives. There are no motives usually. It's more like it's because I felt like it. Like the definition of what an impulsive action is.
Yeah.
It's an action based on impulse. But yeah, the rest of it is like, especially like, although he often takes a stand for order and discipline, he's very likely to be the one who ruins them. That's where the slightly broken English sounds really good. It doesn't say who them is, but it works.
So you actually do that first part. You do take a stand for order and discipline.
Well, on occasion. I wouldn't say often. I would say that part's not necessarily accurate, but but the the one about getting tired of repetitive tasks and inspecting someone else's work, yeah, because that's my job every day.
Right, and then
so yeah, like the number 5 thing, like it's not exactly a stand for order and discipline, but it's like a stand maybe for like consistency and like some basic stuff being done right.
Yeah, I remember you've talked to me about that.
And then 5 and 6 really go together because it's like,
yeah,
I'm like, look, this is the stuff you got to do, and then when they consistently screw it up, then I'm mad about it. But it's not because I'm like, oh well, everything must be kept in order at all times, because anytime I'm not like having to enforce something, then I'm being goofy. I'm not sticking to like a, oh, we got to be serious all the time because we're at work or something. It's more like there are certain things we have to get done, and beyond that, we can have fun.
Right. Yeah, I think Nicole calls them must-dos.
Yeah.
Things that must be done, that she doesn't want to have to do, but must-dos.
Yeah, obligations. don't like obligations is the stuff that weighs on me. Like how the Guardians will worry about stuff they got to do or things that are going to go wrong. The Idealists will worry about, like, you know, is the future going to be what we want it to be? The Rationals will worry about, like, are the systems in place the best ones, or what are the flaws of the systems? How can we improve it?
Right.
But for me, I'll be like, that thing always goes back to that line from Kersey about the next action is a free variable. Anytime that's not the case, where it feels like the variables are not free, or I'm locked into something, there's an obligation, that's the only thing that weighs on me, for the most part. So the more of that there is, then the harder it is for me to actually do anything, because I feel paralyzed by that.
Right. Now, so Victor's observed the same things about, like, artisan resourcefulness, but he's, like, categorized it under NE and TE. And it's...
You gotta wrap this up pretty soon, dude.
Right, okay. Right, okay, so if you give me your thoughts on that, then I can wrap it up.
Thoughts on what?
On these bits that you see on there. We've sort of done this before, but...
yeah, I'm pretty sure we already talked about all that.
Okay. I'm taking the hint, folks. That's inferior FE. No, it's just common sense in the this INTP. So it's good night from me.
Oh, yeah, good night.
Good night. There we go, folks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
We covered the TI anyway, so bye-bye, folks.